Hello everyone and welcome back to Star Technology, where in the last episode we got set up with Create, made our primitive multi-blocks, and fixed our storage issue. Now I have been busy in between episodes sieving here. I made a bit of a drawer system here, and I've been crushing quite a bit of gravel and sieving it here for these resources. I've also decided to craft the latex plantation controller, or the multi-block itself, and as you can see it's been generating latex. Now apparently this thing doesn't actually require inputs or outputs, it's inside the multi-block itself. In fact, all the primitive multi-blocks are like that, the GAI is just lying. So for example, for the primitive ore factory here, this also has its own inputs and output slots. We don't need the inputs and outputs. Now, for a multi-block like the ore factory, I would ideally like to use the inputs and outputs, but this is, I guess, just a convenience thing. And I did go ahead and craft the rest of the components for the primitive ore factory, so let's start the episode with a multi-block build, shall we? And here we go, here's our multi-block primitive ore factory, all built and done. Now what the primitive ore factory does here is that it gives us a more efficient way of processing our resources / ores. So basically what we've been doing so far is we've been smelting our crushed ores in the last bulk smelter over there that we built in Create. But now we actually have a different way to process them, which is if we combine them with coal and water, we can get different dust. So we get the original dust, a chance of an extra of it, and 2 more byproducts. So for example, here for sphalerite we can get gallium and sulfur. For tin we can get zinc and iron, and so on for various different resources. We can either process them 1 at a time or 10 at a time, but it will cost a little bit more coal. Less water though, so that's pretty cool. Now I will ultimately want to have an input hatch for inputting water, because it'll be hard if we were to input water directly into the controller here, since this is not really ideal for automation. So if we're going to have an aqueous accumulator, we can't just place it directly in front of the controller. This won't really be ideal. Now in between episodes I have also been putting some wood in the creosote oven in order to get our creosote oil. We also got some extra charcoal, and I have also smelted a bit of steel here. As you can see, 30 steel. We'll need much more, so I'd ideally like to keep this thing going. But what I've been doing here is making the wrought iron in the campfire, just like I said I would, and leaving it run in the primitive blast furnace then. Alright, so I've crafted a few things here and there. I've crafted the aqueous accumulator and an ULV input hatch. This wasn't too bad to craft, just a piece of glass and some wrought iron here and there. I have already pre-crafted the red alloy cable, and yeah, I had everything I needed, and the aqueous accumulator was pretty simple as well. Now I've also collected some of the ores, and the charcoal I found out you can actually smelt in a normal furnace recipe. So as you can see, we could just use the fan thing to bulk blast it over there. So the coke oven will only be used for creosote oil and nothing else. So with that said, let's go ahead and actually implement this. So we'll have the input hatch be on the left over here, it should still form the multi-block. We're gonna have our aqueous accumulator be this side. I think it's facing the correct direction, and if we set it up like so, it starts generating water, and it is importing it to the input hatch. Now we can verify here by just checking if the recipe works in a second. There used to be a slot here for viewing the different parts of a machine. I guess they removed it. Anyway, so basically what we want to do here is actually, instead of normal charcoal blocks, I think processing it in a block form is actually, I think, a little more efficient. I'm not sure about that. It does turn out to be more efficient on time, since here we take 144 seconds and this would take 160 seconds if we were to process all the 10 ores. So I guess we'll go for that, and wood isn't really an issue, so it's fine. We can make a lot of charcoal. So it seems like we could get 14 blocks for now, which is totally fine. I just want to go ahead and test it out. Now, preferably we would want to first get gold so that we can have a bunch of create control systems and stuff like that. We can also get things like nickel, which is gotten from iron and tin, I think. And then we can mix invar from it and different alloys. So yeah, our priorities are going to be gold and nickel. Now it does seem like we can target both gold and nickel from the copper ore. Now the problem here is that the chances are actually not split. So basically here there's a 25% chance of 10 pieces of gold, but here there's a 25% chance for a single piece of gold. So this is a less percent chance of getting the extra byproducts. But I think this is a risk I'm willing to take for the time being. We'll see later if this is an issue. Let's test it out, I guess. As you can see, it's working perfectly fine. This will take quite some time, but that's fine. Oh, and it seems that it actually does the chances differently. So maybe it is actually just a 25% chance on every iteration, because it does say here in the tooltip on top that it gives 3 gold dust and 1 nickel dust and 5 copper, which aren't the numbers listed in JI. I guess we'll wait and see. Meanwhile, I actually want to go ahead and tackle something that's been annoying me for quite some time, which is the rain, the weather. Now, they added a command here in the shop here, where you can go ahead and just submit 16 star coins here for the weather command and stuff. And these two will go ahead and execute the commands. We want to disable the weather cycle. Let's first check that it's actually not rainy. Now the problem here is we can't execute the command, so we'll have to open to LAN, allow cheats, and we can go ahead and execute the command in the shop now. There we go. Now if I want to turn it back on, I can just do that. I've already paid the star coins. Now there's also the daylight cycle here. I don't know if I want to do that. I think I'll keep it default for the time being, but I'll definitely turn off the rain because it's pretty annoying. If I need it anytime soon, then I'll turn it back on. It's fine. Anyway, so what is our goal for this episode? So let's reassess ourselves in the quest book here. So we've made the beginner stuff. We've gone to create. We have made our beginner alloys and have gone into a bit of multi-block machines here and there. So I guess our next step is to just get into low voltage. So all we're really missing here is the LV machine hull and the LV circuit. The circuit requires a bunch of components here and there, and obviously the energy converter so that we can generate power, but that's a combination of both the circuit and this guy. Now first I'd like to tackle something that might be a minor inconvenience later on, which is the soul sand. Now the soul sand is a barrel recipe, a wooden barrel recipe, and it's sand with witch water in order to generate soul sand. And the problem is that both of them require the wooden barrel, so both of them require this specific type of barrel. So I guess it's time for a second one of these. They're extremely cheap at this point in the game, so that's fine. Alright, so I've actually made 2 wooden barrels here. One of them is automatically making me witch water, which we're buffering in this fluid cell here that I made. And the fluid cell is actually bringing the witch water through the pipe into the second wooden barrel. And this one's going to be specifically used for anything that requires witch water. So for example, here we have our mainly soul soil, soul sand, slime blocks, things like that. I don't think we'll be using this recipe a lot. We also have a recipe to convert cobblestone into blackstone, which saves us from using this recipe. And yeah, just in general, any witch water related recipe can be used here. Now if I need one for the stone barrel, I can just add a fluid pipe on the side here as well, no problem there. Anyway, once this buffer fills up and the pipes buffer fills up, it should start filling up with witch water here for whatever we want to use it in the future. And it does seem like our first few batches of ores are actually done here, but it does seem like we're only getting the copper for some reason, which is kind of weird. I am going to try to make the other recipe, the one that's just a single copper with charcoal. Maybe that's why we're not getting any byproducts. Maybe it's because of some kind of output issue. Maybe we need an output bus. I don't know, we'll see. Alright, so let's start with the first kind of progression into LV. We'll finish the first half, the easy half, which is getting the LV machine hull. Now at this point, this thing is easy, just wrought iron, 2 tin cables. We have our rubber at this point, and tin is easy to come by. We have our steel at this point. I have taken out the second batch of steel. So now we have a total of 62. This should be enough to last us quite some time. And I think I want to start by actually batch crafting some of these resources. So looking directly at the LV chapter here, I think I might want to immediately pick up machines like the polarizer, maybe the bending machine, the wire mill. The bending machine isn't that much of a priority because we already have our material press. But the wire mill, definitely. So maybe we'll make like 4 machine hulls. I think that's a pretty good amount. Oh no. Please no. Please. You kidding me? You can't... Oh, you can't material press the steel. Oh no. We're gonna have to make it the inefficient way. Yeah, you need to make it through the hammer. You can't put it through this guy. Okay, that means we're gonna need like double the steel we already have. This isn't gonna be fun, I can already tell. And there we go, we have our machine hulls. So this right here is the first part to getting to LV. We have our machine hulls. The second part is going to be getting the basic electronic circuit. And before we get into that, I do want to say that the ore factory is actually producing our byproducts. Maybe it's just that it wasn't rolling a successful chance at the beginning, but it does seem to have fixed itself, and now we're getting gold, we're getting nickel, all kinds of ores that we can smelt here. Now I think at this point I'd probably prefer more nickel, so let's keep processing some of the iron ore. I will do magnetite next since it gives us a lot of gold, and yes, I will be going with this recipe. I don't know if this actually reduces the chance of you getting it. I don't know how the chances work. It does seem like the chances have increased when I started using the single recipe, so I'm just gonna keep doing that. And it's fine if it takes longer, I mean, we have infinite time, right? Now something that isn't required here, but I'm gonna do for the quest is to mix some Invar. Now Invar isn't used till late LV when you want to make the blast furnace, but it is a quest here in the ULV chapter, so that's fine. And if you're wondering about this Steam ore factory thing, it is disabled until the next version, which I've heard is actually releasing next week, so I'm pretty excited for that. I will be updating this world as I go if I can. Okay, so back to the soul sand here. We need it in order to make the wire for LV, which I will be talking about in a bit. But first we need to go ahead and put the sand in the witch water and we can get some of the soul sand. I've buffered quite a decent amount right now, so this should be fine. We should be able to waste it all. Oh, and that's right, I just remembered, in order to make the alloy that I'm looking to make here, we do need the Invar, so in fact, yes, it is pretty useful at the early tier now. Now, it does seem there's a way to create soul sand using create as well. Basically, if you have some soul fire, which you create by putting soul sand under fire, and you put some sand onto it, just like we do with the smelting, but instead of lava, we use the fire. But I'd rather keep doing it the witch water way, since this is a bit more convenient and efficient. Because I kind of feel like it's gonna be inconvenient if I want to keep removing this trapdoor, the lava, and the cobblestone underneath, and I have to keep relighting it every now and then. So I'd rather just keep doing it this way. Even if it is a little slower, I'm kind of fine with that. Plus we aren't going to be using a crazy amount early game anyway. Alright, so in order to go ahead and get this LV superconductor alloy, which I will talk about in a bit, we need to go ahead and mix nickel and iron. I don't really know why it's not working here. Oh, they're both supposed to be ingots, right? I need to smelt them. And here we go, we have our Invar. Now the Invar we want to combine with the soul sand dust that we just made. If I go ahead and actually fuel the mixer here. And we should be getting our soul infused ingots. There we go. And here we go. We have our soul infused ingots. Now in order to actually complete the quest, we need our wires. And I don't think this can be... Oh, it can be a material quest. Okay, that's nice. So we need to get the soul infused wires, which are actually special in this version, and we will go over it in just a moment. Here we go. Okay, so it says here we go read about superconductors, but let me go ahead and explain it briefly here. So basically, when we get to low voltage, we're going to need to generate some kind of electricity or power. And the way you transfer electricity is using some kind of wire or cable. Now usually, cables have some kind of loss in them. So basically, they lose electricity as we go. Now for red alloy here, this is the superconductor for ULV. But ULV is basically 8 EU, and each time you scale up the voltage, so LV is 4 times the previous. So ULV is 8 EU or 8 voltage. LV is 32, as you can see in the tooltip. Now if you send, for example, LV power into a ULV wire, it will burn up and just disappear. So it can't handle a voltage above than it carries. Now for a regular cable, like for example, let's say we use a tin cable here. As you can see, it has something called the loss per meter per amp, which is basically how much voltage it loses as it goes. So if I go ahead and place tin cable across the platform or across anywhere, so if I go like for example 3 blocks, I will lose 3 voltage. So it will go down from 32 voltage, the 32 I'm supplying it, down to 29, which basically means that I'm only feeding the machine less than it needs to. And the thing about normal cables is that they actually have to be coated. If they're not coated, then it does damage you and the loss is greater. So it does electrocute you and the loss is greater. Now superconductors solve both of these issues, so no matter how far I place them, no matter how long the cable is, it doesn't lose any power. And I can go ahead and touch it no matter what I want, and it won't hurt me, and it doesn't need to be coated, so that's very nice. Now all of this will be explained later on when we actually have machines, but this is what I mean. So in this case, if this was a tin cable, it would lose 4 voltage, or it's actually called EU, so I'll be referring to it as that. It's going to lose 4 EU until it reaches from the power source to the machine. But for superconductors, it will only lose 0, it will lose nothing. So if I supply it with 32 EU, it's gonna output 32 EU and everything's gonna be fine. Now, as you can see here, the quest talking about superconductors does actually list all the superconductors for each tier. So for LV, it's the soul infused wire we made, for MV is signalum, HV is lumium, and so on until we reach the UEV superconductor. I think they're going to be adding the UIV one in the next update, as far as I know. Okay, so just before the final stretch here, I do want a way to make sticky resin, because making the LV circuit board, which is a component for the circuits, do require sticky resin, which is slime blocks, which is Slotaki spores, and I do want a way to duplicate Slotaki spores, since sieving mud is a bit of a pain here. So I do want a way to make the Slotaki spores duplicatable. And so what I need is the large barrel here. Now this thing is a multi-block version of the wooden barrel that we used over there, and it requires creosote oil. It's one of these multi-blocks, the primitive multi-blocks that are down here. And I've actually made an area for all three of them over here. So we have an area for the wooden barrel, the stone barrel, and the large farm that we're going to be eventually making. So I am going to be crafting the wooden barrel for the time being, since I don't really see much use right now for the others. We will be using them eventually, just not now. And yeah, I'll meet you then. Now, treated wood isn't too bad to craft at the moment, so we have a lot of creosote oil from placing a lot of logs in the coke oven, and so we only need 3 buckets in order to craft this multi-block, so I will craft it and we'll be right back. Alright, so a slight inconvenience was that the large barrel did require the ULV input and output bus, the input and output hatch, but at that point in the game, I think we can easily craft those, that's fine. So with that said, we can go ahead and put the pump decks at the bottom here. We can have our controller right like so. And for ease of access, since we're going to be grabbing the witch water from here, I'm going to have the input hatch be out the back over here. And we're going to have the output bus here in the right and input bus on the left. This is usually my configuration for the multi-blocks. We have the inputs on the left and the outputs on the right. And the output hatch, I don't really think we're going to be using for this multi-block. So let me see if it's actually a requirement here. It seems like it's fine if you don't use an output hatch, so I think I'm just going to cover it with treated wood, that's fine. And we'll save the output hatch for something else later. I did need it to finish the quest though, which is why I gathered it. So basically it's like the primitive blast furnace structure, so it's hollow from the middle, 3 blocks up, like so, and I think, there we go, the structure is formed. This thing requires absolutely no form of power or anything. You just put in the item, you put in the fluid or whatever, and you take out whatever you want. So we already have saved a Slotaki spore here from the last time we sieved. We have a full fluid cell of witch water, so let's go ahead and test that out. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and place that over here. We're going to output from the right so that it goes into the input hatch. In the input bus, we can put the Slotaki spore, and as you can see, in just 1 second, it goes ahead and gets us the Slotaki spore. Now it is a chance, but it's only like 95%, so that's fine. And we're getting a lot of Slotaki spores. These can be smelted directly into sticky resin and can be used for various different things, mainly the LV circuits. And the cool thing here is that it barely consumes any witch water, so it only consumes 100 millibuckets, and we can easily replenish that over there, so no problem here. Alright, so after running this thing for quite some time, we are gathering a pretty big batch of Slotaki spores. So let's actually start converting some of them, and this time be careful to actually pick up the slime balls for long enough to get the quest. Alright, so at this point I think we've kind of mastered the ULV chapter here, aside from these 2 multi-blocks which we will be getting later. So I think it's time to just make the final move and get to the LV chapter and make the basic electronic circuit. Now the basic electronic circuit actually has a few parts to it. The first parts are the random materials here and there, so we have the steel plates, we have the red alloy cable. Those are fine, those are easy to get. The second ones are the electronic components. So we have the vacuum tube, which is considered a ULV tier circuit, but it's also a component of the LV tier circuit. And it's just essentially copper wires, steel bolts, and glass tubes. They're not that expensive. And glass tubes are essentially just glass panes. Now resistors are basically copper fine wire, which is just copper foils, which is a copper plate, no problem there. Sticky resin, paper from sugarcane. I might need to start farming sugarcane later on in like a sand area or whatever, and just some kind of charcoal dust or coal dust or something. It does seem like it only takes charcoal dust here, so we'll just go with that. That's what we have anyway. And finally, we have the circuit board itself, which is 2 steps. The first step is to have some wooden planks with sticky resin. Wooden planks are just oak slabs. or any slabs. And the second part is to encase it with copper wires. So this whole process is going to take a lot of copper. And there we go, we have our circuit. Now again, we could utilize the tree function here and just set however much circuits we want to craft and their recipes, and we should be getting the total amount of resources down there. Now looking at the LV quest chapter, you might be thinking, well, there's not too much machines we want to go for at the beginning. So things like the polarizer, the wire mill, maybe the bending machine, the chemical reactor centrifuge, they're not going to be a lot of machines, but we are going to need a lot of circuits for various different things. And ideally want to batch craft circuits to the level where we kind of take a long time to get rid of them, but also not to the point where we're basically wasting too much resources because it's inefficient. I want to kind of keep the balance between batch crafting and inefficiency. So I think to start with, 16 circuits could be good, and we basically go ahead and batch craft all the other components. Just like before, we set our recipes here and it tells us all the base components here, and it tells us how much the total cost is. So basically I'm going to set up the whole tree and I'm going to try and batch craft the circuits. Now these circuits we will burn through getting the basic machines. I know we'll finish quickly, but at that point circuits will become 100 times cheaper because we're going to have these machines. So that's what I kind of meant by balancing between inefficiency and batch crafting. Alright, so this is what the crafting tree is gonna look like. Yeah, this is a huge craft that we're about to do here. Or at least it looks like it. It looks like it's intimidating, but really if you look at the total cost here, it's nothing new, it's nothing we haven't seen before. The sticky resin we have plenty of. Wooden planks is just wood. The charcoal we have plenty of. Steel we can just smelt in a blast furnace. Sulfur we can just sieve, latex we already have that, the copper we have plenty of, redstone we can also just sieve, and sugarcane we can just grow, and glass is literally just flint and sand, so we can just get that from cobblestone. So it's really nothing new that we haven't seen before, so yeah, let's get crafting. And there we go, we now have our basic electronic circuits. Now these are basically the basic components in order to craft all the LV machines and stuff. So the circuits are used to craft machines and other things basically, mainly machines. And the machine hulls are also used to craft machines, they're the basic parts of machines. So circuits and machine hulls are the bases of machines. If you have these two, then you can basically craft almost every single machine. Now there are some other components that we'll get to, but they're not as bad as this one. But now we have made it onto the Industrial Revolution age, and we are officially out of the ULV chapter. Perfect. Now just a little comment here, I did have to make the large farm here because farming sugarcane while repetitively sneaking or basically the same tree method doesn't work. So I had to make a faster way of farming sugarcane. This thing wasn't too expensive, it was just some treated wood and treated wood frames, as well as some farmland. I had to make a ULV input and output bus, but those aren't really a problem at this point. The large farm controller was extremely easy to make, and yeah, there we go, we're passively farming sugarcane. It does work only during the day, so I had to purchase the daylight enabling command thingy here, or disable, actually, I disabled the daytime. Now again, we can go ahead and re-enable it again if we want it to become nighttime for whatever reason, but I don't think we'll be wanting that anytime soon. So yeah, I guess I can't really find anything else to talk about here. We have done a significant progress today. We have jumped all the way from the ULV to the LV8. We've crafted some more primitive multi-blocks here and there, expanded a bit of our ore processing system, and even set up a little bit of passive processes here and there, such as sugarcane and witch water. So thank you everybody for watching, and it's industrialization from now. I'll see you guys in the next episode.